All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for the Afghanistan webinar briefing. Today, our panelists will provide updates on the humanitarian crisis that is happening in Afghanistan, as well as provide follow-up in regards to policy, resettlement, and action. Participants will have an opportunity to ask questions to our panelists. Now, before we begin, a few housekeeping items I want to mention. Please be advised that this webinar session will be recorded and shared among our networks. Also, if you have questions, we will have someone monitoring the chat box, so you may type your questions anytime throughout the webinar in the chat Q&A box. To begin, my name is Nada Sumig, and I'm the National Field Manager for We Are All America. We Are All America works to uphold our nation's commitments to welcome and protect those who are seeking freedom, safety, and refuge in the United States. We organize people across religious and cultural differences to build inclusive communities where we all belong. Over the past several years, We Are All America has led the emergence of an effective national organizing infrastructure that can mobilize public support for those who are fleeing persecution and violence, and develop more welcoming policies and practices in the area at the federal and state levels. Now, to provide some context, on February 29th, 2020, the US signed an agreement with the Taliban to withdraw troops in 14 months if the Taliban upheld the terms of the agreement. On August 15, 2021, just under 20 years after an American-led coalition ended Taliban rule in Afghanistan, a revitalized Taliban took Kabul. The Taliban and the US military have negotiated an agreement to evacuate American citizens and Afghans by August 31st, a deadline that is quickly approaching. Now, that being said, I am going to turn it over to our first panelist, Chris Purdy, who is the project manager at Veterans for American Ideals, and he will provide more context on what is happening on the ground. Chris, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Nira, and thanks everybody for joining today. So I think we've all seen the really challenging videos that have come out of the airfield over the last week. Really devastating images of families doing whatever they can to survive. It has been a miracle, frankly, that the people who have gotten through the gates have gotten through them and onto planes. We've heard stories of just absolutely harrowing travels and journeys to make that. Many families have had to make the journey multiple times. They've been turned away at the gate, regardless of status in some instance. These folks are being kind of either self-organized or directed by individuals here in the United States and trying to provide the best up-to-date information that they can. This is what's been called, I think a lot of folks have heard about this, is called digital Dunkirk, where individuals who have a close association with the conflict and with the people in Afghanistan are basically directing folks from 15,000 miles away. Go to this gate, go there, show this document. This is what you need to say to this guard. It's been a week and a half since this has all begun, and the process has not become any less chaotic. It's unfortunately a very unequitable process that people are being allowed in without very much rhyme or reason, other than essentially what is being shown up you're showing up at the gate with some resilience and some grit and maybe some luck and maybe some status. And that's how people are getting in. And we're leaving a lot of people behind. It's very unfair. It's very dangerous. And it doesn't have to be this way. This was all very avoidable. But this is where we're at. We understand that the evacuation is starting to wind down, and they are slowly starting to close the gate to anybody without a US passport. That is going to leave a lot of people with very hard choices, because as was mentioned, we do have a deal with the Taliban to allow US citizens and LPRs to get through their lines and through checkpoints. But the way that the Taliban have been enforcing this deal is not the intent and not the spirit of the negotiation, I believe. And so I'll give you an example. What does that mean? So, for example, over the past week or so, legal permanent residents and U.S. citizens have been allowed through Taliban checkpoints without being harassed. However, the Taliban have been saying, okay, you as an individual, if you're an LPR or a U.S. citizen, you may go through, but if you have children or family members associated with you who are not of that status, that they'll have to stay behind or will be denied entry through that checkpoint. So that means that family members who are U.S. citizens are being denied the ability to bring their family members through Taliban checkpoints and be evacuated, and very hard decisions of those families are going to have to be made, whether they stay behind or go through a different way. So I wish I had better news. I wish I could say it wasn't as chaotic as it was last week, but it has not gotten any better. And the most disturbing thing that we have seen, in addition to these denials by the Taliban of LPRs and U.S. citizens and special immigrant visa holders, the really tragic thing is that once people are getting inside the gate, there appears to be some mechanism where families are being removed after they have gained access and passed the State Department checkpoint. And we have not been able to ascertain reasoning for that or any, logic or, again, rhyme or reason. But my heart breaks for the families that have made it through this harrowing journey, are sitting on the tarmac and then are approached and said, I'm sorry, you have to leave because we need to make room for somebody else. And that is tragic. And that is frankly, a moral injury on top of this entire event, which will be a moral injury for veterans of the global war on terror generation. So I wish I had better news to share what's going on the ground, but that's what's happening.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that update. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Yang, who's the Vice President of World Relief. She's going to talk a little bit about the challenges around resettlement domestically. Jenny, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So my name is Jenny, and I work with World Relief, which is one of the 9 refugee resettlement agencies that's based right out of Baltimore. And so many of us probably are well aware of the fact that not only are Afghans being evacuated, but they're arriving to the United States, and some of them may be arriving into the communities where you live. And so Chris mentioned just the ongoing challenges with evacuation on the ground in Kabul. And so to our understanding, many of these individuals who are being evacuated are being sent to third countries for processing in Qatar and other places. And then once they're done some processing, they're then being transited to the United States, where they can finish some of their processing. And so the State Department has communicated to us last week that they're expecting up to 50,000 Afghan parolees and then up to 20,000 Afghan SIVs to arrive to the United States over the next several weeks, which means that we have an incredible amount of work to prepare our networks, to make sure we have all the resources necessary to partner with the private sector and to continue our advocacy to make sure that Congress and the White House don't just evacuate Afghans, but then actually provides the services that are needed to make sure that they thrive once they get here. And so if we're talking about a population of perhaps up to 70,000 individuals who are going to be coming to the United States, a lot of our services depends on what statuses they have, and also making sure that whatever we can provide them is as comprehensive as possible. And so many of you may be aware that the evacuation actually started before the fall of Kabul. At the end of July, early August, when the Biden administration started a slow operation of evacuating around 2,000 Afghan SIVs. So many of these individuals were in the very late stages of approval and processing. And so when they got here, many of them were supported with resettlement services, and many of them were even walking into some of World Relief's offices to just get services if they had flown into the US on their own. But the 50,000 parolees that we're anticipating over the next several weeks, parolee status is a discretionary temporary status that individuals have. Oftentimes they're granted this status for humanitarian reasons, like we're seeing in Afghanistan. But what this means is that many of these individuals will not be eligible they're not eligible for RMP benefits, and also that they're going to have to adjust status once they're here. And for right now, most of them will need to apply for asylum once they're in the United States. Now, this is a huge gap that we've identified that we're going to be asking Congress to try to fix for us so that resettlement agencies can actually serve the parolees once they're here with RMP benefits like SIVs receive. But because of this, we're doing everything that we can right now for the parolees that have already arrived to make sure that their immediate needs are being met as they arrive to the airport. So you may have also heard that there are several military bases that are going to be used in the facilitation of the processing of Afghan evacuees once they arrive to the States. And so we have Fort Lee in Virginia, which we believe is going to be used to help process SIVs. But for others, parolees and others, many of them will be processed in Fort Bliss in Texas, Fort McCoy in Wisconsin. And we've also heard recently that Fort Dix in New Jersey is also going to be used as a place for processing. One of our critical needs right now is just making sure that the parolees that enter into the US are connected to a refugee settlement agency. Many of the military bases in the US that are being staffed fortunately by refugee resettlement agency staff who have expertise on the service side of things. But one of our main asks is going to continue to be to have these military bases staffed by refugee resettlement experts, so that the people that are being paroled in and others can actually receive the benefits of individuals who know their circumstances and know exactly what they need to transition into the US. As I've talked with a lot of our US offices, especially Sacramento and Seattle, where we're seeing a large number of Afghan arrivals, there are several needs that are really significant in the community as they're arriving. The first is with housing. It is very hard, and it has been very challenging to turn around assurances within 24 hours and then to find a house for sometimes large families as they're arriving. So we actually have partnered with organizations like B&B, companies like Airbnb and others, just to make sure that we have robust housing. We've had a lot of volunteers from various communities, even churches and others volunteering to offer housing. So that is going to be one of our main needs going forward. The second need we identified is just around mental health. A lot of Afghans that are arriving have significant mental health challenges, and we want to make sure that we're ready with trauma counselors and others who can help just make sure that they have people to talk with and process what happened to them and their families over the past many years. The other thing we're looking at is just what it looks like for Afghans to re-enter into the workforce. We know that many of the people that are arriving are individuals with many skills. Many of them are very good English speakers. And so working with employers to make sure we can have many Afghans employed as quickly as possible is going to be an ongoing need for us. And the last thing I would mention is just around legal assistance. Many of these Afghans that are being paroled in, depending on if we can get legislation passed or not, will need to apply for asylum. Many of them are going to be needing to adjust status and get actually processing for their employment authorization, which we've heard that many of them will have once they get here. And so all of these things will be critical needs to make sure that we can serve the Afghans who are coming as best as possible. So thanks, and I look forward to hearing any questions that you have.
Thanks, Jenny. I do see one hand up, and I did want to allow Leticia Calvillo from City of Tulsa. You had a question? Looks like you're on mute. If you want to type it in the chat box, or can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, that was an accident.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, for that detailed overview. We really appreciate your time and being here. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Quigley with Human Rights First, who's the Senior Director of Government Affairs. So Jennifer, I turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Dana, and thanks to the whole We Are All America team for setting this up. So first I want to talk about kind of what makes me the most angry right now, which is that the Biden administration is holding to the August 31st deadline. We will not have gotten out American citizens. We will not have gotten out legal, lawful permanent residents. We will not have gotten out SIVs. We will not have gotten out many at-risk vulnerable Afghans by that timeline. That timeline actually, because it requires a military withdrawal, is actually not August 31st for the vulnerable individuals to get out. And so we cannot let the Biden administration think that this is like mission accomplished, mission complete, in any way, shape, or form, that we are done with an evacuation effort from Afghanistan. This is something that needs to come from people all across the US, from the media, from your members of Congress, that we demand answers from the Biden administration as to what their plan is to ensure that all of these populations reach safety. That's number one. So just, we're going to need people to keep up that drumbeat, right? It's just going to be incredibly important on social media, you know, sort of every which way it is that you can sort of raise your voice on that. This is not over today or on August 31st. This is a long-term issue that we're going to have to address as a nation. The second is sort of as Jenny sort of pointed out, in like, you know, in my opinion, in sort of like super technical immigration speak, right? This population comes in different and has, you know, access to very little. And that's something that Congress can rectify, right? And so over the next few days, we've been working with congressional offices. And so we are hoping to get very, very soon. And so we'll sort of have bill numbers and stuff for you to reach out to your members to ensure authorization and funding for the types of services that SIVs and refugees would receive coming in, right? So we sort of call this corrective measures that Congress could take to make sure that even though this was something that had to happen very quickly, that they have the services available to them, and that there isn't this huge burden on communities and resettlement agencies to provide stuff that usually the federal government provides through the resettlement agencies. And so that's going to be incredibly important. As Jenny mentioned, we're hoping, we'll see, fingers crossed, that we'll be able to push a blanket adjustment of status bill, right? So the whole idea here is that these people are going to have to apply for asylum if we don't provide legislation that provides a path to legalization. That's an enormous lift for the legal community to do individual asylum applications for an additional, say, potentially, we don't know yet, but potentially 50,000 people, as Jenny mentioned. And so the idea that we provide something that's similar to what we've done for Cubans in the past. And so hopefully we'll have a bill that all of you can sort of lobby around. And so sort of just to keep in mind that we sort of, I'm going to be brief, right? So it's continue to pressure the Biden administration on making sure that this is not the end. In addition to getting more people out, right, we do have a responsibility to the civil society sector in Afghanistan in making sure that we're providing humanitarian assistance both inside Afghanistan as well as outside of Afghanistan, and that there's sort of a long road ahead both internationally and domestically on this issue. And then hopefully Congress can help us address some of the issues about those who have arrived. But in the meantime, I just ask everybody to heed what Jenny had said in providing as much help and support as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that information, Jennifer. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to our next panelist, Bilal, who is the communications coordinator with the Welcoming with Dignity campaign. And he's going to talk a little bit about some of the resources for helping your loved ones. And Bilal, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Bilal Askariar. I'm the communications coordinator for the Welcome with Dignity campaign. We're a national campaign made of more than 85 organizations, national, regional, and local organizations that serve and advocate for people seeking asylum in the United States. And I also am an Afghan American who was born in Kabul and raised in the United States. I've worked in Afghanistan for different development and aid organizations, and have extensive ties to the country. This is a really difficult time for us in the diaspora, and thus, obviously, it goes without saying, those of us in Afghanistan. As you may know, Afghanistan hasn't seen a day of peace since 1979, when the Soviet Union first invaded. What that means is, if you are like me, under the age of 40, you've never known an Afghanistan that wasn't at war. But this is different. This is really different because this level of chaos, instability, and fear is really something else. For the past week, we in the diaspora have been scrambling to get people's passport information, any kind of documentation from people in Afghanistan, anything from, a letter of employment, paychecks, employee ID cards, and trying to send them to lists, any kind of list that we can get people on, State Department, etc. And what I want to say is that it may not seem helpful, but it's still worth saying, is that this was preventable. This shouldn't have happened, and this didn't need to happen. We in the diaspora, we in Afghan civil society in the country warned the Biden administration, warned the Trump administration that this would happen with a hasty withdrawal, but our pleas were landed on ears that didn't want to hear them, because it just seems like people are ready just to wash their hands of Afghans and just move on. But we see now that this is the result. So what's happening now is that, like other speakers have said, that there are US citizens with Afghan-born children who are not being allowed on planes. There are, legal permanent residents of the United States, for example, someone who is married to an American citizen but is of Afghan descent, who isn't allowed onto planes. And it's also just about the hundreds of thousands of Afghans who put their lives on the line doing the work that the United States wanted them to do, not just translating for military soldiers, but fighting for democracy, fighting for human rights, educating women and girls. Those are the people that are going to be left behind, and those are the people that are going to be targeted from the Taliban. The Taliban are on a PR offensive to say that they have changed. They have not. They have issued statements that they're going to stone or kill LGBTQ people, that women should stay home from work, that education of girls means only reading the Quran, and that's it. So they might have rebranded, but they're the same people that we know very well. I think what I'd like to say is the most urgent thing that we need right now is for everyone on this call and all of your friends and family to push the Biden administration as much as possible to extend the August 31st deadline. This deadline is arbitrary. It was picked out, a date on the calendar. And the arbitrary capriciousness of this deadline means that vulnerable people who fought for us, whether it was through democracy or literally picking up a gun and fighting with US soldiers, they're going to be left behind and either face abject degradation at the hands of the Taliban or death. And if that's not the kind of place that I want the United States to be, we need to keep up. We need to keep our promises. We have a moral duty to fight for these people. And we know that we can get these people to safety if we secure the airport and keep these flights going past August 31st. In relation to my work with Welcome with Dignity, I just want to say I am heartbroken and confused by what is happening with the Biden administration. President Biden is not the compassionate person that we thought we were voting for, at least not based on his policies. President Biden is turning vulnerable families away at the border under the pretext of Title 42. He is not fighting against, he is not taking actions to repeal President Trump's policies that basically decimated our asylum and refugee system. We saw earlier in the beginning days of his campaign where he decided to keep President Trump's low refugee cap because he was spooked by what people might say in terms of him letting in people into this country. And so it is so disappointing, but I think that I want to believe that he is still open to changing his mind if he hears enough from us. And so I'm hoping that all of you, all of us on this call, warm, big-hearted Americans and Afghans in the diaspora organize today to make these demands. Thank you.
And Bilal, I know yesterday you shared some really good information about what is happening here once people arrive. I think it would be really helpful to provide some of that context, what we're seeing and what the needs are as well, if you can.
Yeah, very quickly. So initially when flights from Qatar were landing in Dulles. We saw a breakdown in communication at the airport between the government agencies running those flights. So that would be Department of Defense and Department of State and the government officials at the airport. I understand that, this is an emergency evacuation, so processes are being put into place as we go. But again, the United States government is powerful and full of smart people. And so we should have been able to plan ahead better. We saw families being released into public areas of the airport without any further instructions of what they should do. Can you imagine just being, at baggage claim in a country you don't know and in a language you don't speak without any kind of information of whether or not you're going to be there legally, whether or not you're going to have any access to benefits, resources, where to go, how to get there. And keep in mind that these people have been traveling or attempting to travel for the past 5 days, if not a week, with the things that they had on their back or things that fit in a plastic bag. And the banks in Afghanistan have been closed for the past 5 days. So no cash, cell phones dead, no change of clothes, no address information for relatives in the United States, if they even have any. That process, is being built up. People are now being transferred more carefully, but we still need to work on a way to make sure that people who are here on humanitarian parole, which is other panelists have said is a temporary status, know that they need to stay in contact with government officials, resettlement volunteers and staff, so that they are then registered for the benefits and things that they need. So there are several volunteer efforts happening at these different forts, and we're organizing Afghan Diaspora volunteers who speak the languages and know the culture to help with legal clinics and get them medical checks. A lot of the women understandably don't feel comfortable with male doctors, so we're looking to reach out to female Afghan American doctors who can do health checks on them, and working on that.
Thank you so much, Bilal, for all of the information you provided and for being on the webinar today. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Senator Casey Jama, who is a former refugee from Somalia and now the Oregon State legislator. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Senator Jama, to talk about engagement of elected officials.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Naira, thank you so much for inviting me, and I appreciate this briefing organized by NPNA and Will America. I'm gonna just talk about a little bit of the process. As Naira said, I'm originally from Somalia. I came to this country as a refugee, so my heart's really aching and feeling the challenges that our Afghani families and community members are facing, both at home here and also in Afghanistan. I'm going to start a little bit sharing a little bit what we've been doing in Oregon, and then hopefully we can have some Q&A. When the Biden administration announced that they're going to withdraw the troops and leave Afghanistan, of course, we all knew that's what that means. And we see the heartbreaking images that's coming from Kabul and Afghanistan. When crisis started, my office collaborated with Representative Khan Pham, who is Oregon House of Representative, and myself. Both of us have connections to refugee community members. She is the daughter of a refugee from Vietnam. And as I said earlier, I'm originally from Somalia. I came to this country as a refugee. So we're both of us work together, writing a letter to the governor of Oregon, Governor Kate Brown, as well as our federal delegation and the Biden administration, encouraging and asking to make sure that all the refugees' families are evacuated from Afghanistan, both not only those who work with our U.S. Troops in Afghanistan, but also all the folks who are working with the civil society, women's rights, and other NGOs as well. So we try to broaden the conversation that way based off the information we received our national partners. And after we sent the letter, luckily, our governor responded immediately. Both our delegations also responded immediately and said they want to welcome refugees in Oregon. And so that's really good news. And we are hopefully that will means that the refugees will be able to arrive and get support they need in Oregon. Secondly, as I was also 6 months ago appointed to Oregon Senate, we passed and created a bill that will create an Office of Immigrant Refugee Advancement. We're hoping that infrastructure will help to facilitate some of the challenges that Afghani refugees will be facing when they're arriving. We need to come together as a community to ensure when people are being sent to our states that they are welcome, they are supported, and they need to be taken care of it. And I think folks mentioned the needs that is so desperately folks need. So we're hoping Oregon will be an example of that. And I think the letter also mentioned earlier, over 50 senators and House of Representatives actually signed and said that we want to make sure Oregon is welcoming the state and welcome our Afghani refugees to Oregon. So that's really good news. Secondly, we're also mobilizing on the ground as well as we speak as well. So one of the things we're trying to do is that how do we help our resettlement agencies to prepare the arrivals of refugees from Afghanistan? And as you all know that during the Trump administration, most of the infrastructure of the resettlement agency has been decimated. So we need to rebuild as we also work with the refugees who are arriving right now. What that means is that we need to push the Biden administration to continuously support refugees as they resettle in Oregon and across the United States, and also provide resources for the resettlement agencies so they do have the capacity to support those refugees overall. So we need to rebuild the infrastructure again, as I said earlier. And with that said, we're also making sure that we're supporting what has been described to one of the most difficult challenge that people are facing to live in Kabul and Afghanistan. We have case managers, our staff members are creating a support system where we're collaborating with our delegations, both Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden, to help streamline how they can support the refugees their families are stuck in Kabul. And we really, to be honest with you, we're feeling the same challenge that people are facing. We have families who are being taken away from the airport and unable to get on board and leave Afghanistan. And that's really a challenge that I want to emphasize on how difficult it is and people are facing this challenge. And I want to encourage all of us to ensure that no one is left behind, and we need to create that message to be clear to the Biden administration. With that said, I'm going to stop there. That's one of the things that we've been doing. So I'll just happy to answer any questions that folks have about what's happening in Oregon and overall how we can support our resettlement agencies and refugees when they arrive in Oregon and United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jama. So what would you encourage folks in other states to do as a first step or initial step to engage their elected officials, or what would you encourage them?
I think, of course, as you know, Naira, every state is different, and there's a different level of support and familiarity around refugee issues. Some states are more welcoming than the other ones. So I think depending your state where you are, if you can connect with your first step will be folks who are sympathetic to the refugee cause and working with those legislators. And I have to admit, this has to be bipartisan. We you know, in Oregon, we get both parties supported in this effort when we're writing the letter. So really, refugee issue should not be a partisan issue. And I think that would be really a place to start to make sure that you connect with your local legislators and both, elected officials, as well as your community who are actually work with the community as refugees arrive. So there has to be those two parallel scenarios, building infrastructure, as well as connecting to creating the political narrative around United States should be welcoming refugees, particularly those who are now fleeing from Afghanistan.
Thank you so much for your time, Senator Jama, and for your input. That is very helpful. And I definitely encourage all of you out there to, reach out to your local elected officials and really urge the Biden administration to do the right thing. And also connect with your local resettlement agencies and see what the need is, what the biggest need is. along with your ethnic community-based organizations. They are doing the work as well. So I think at this time we can turn it over for a Q&A. And if you have questions, we're going to ask you now to please put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. That way we can address those. And I do see one question here. So if any of our panelists want to answer this, the question is, how is the best way to support steep ramp up in providing cultural competent, linguistically competent, trauma-informed mental health services? It feels like that is a very long way runaway for such an immediate need. So any of our panelists would like to answer that.
Yeah, I can answer that. I know for many of our US offices that we are looking to hire that staff right now. And actually we have several volunteer forms on our websites at our various offices where we're asking for volunteers who have that kind of competency to either volunteer with us or to be staffed by World Relief as we're hiring new staff. And so, as you mentioned, having someone who speaks the language, understands the culture, and obviously has the right technical skills to serve Afghans well is going to be really, really important. And so right now, we have so many volunteers who have a variety of skills who are actually reaching out to us right now. And so right now, it's actually a matter of coordinating these individuals into our system so that we can have them connected into the work that we have ahead of us. And so that's a great question. And if you know folks that are looking to volunteer or even work for one of the agencies that are serving Afghans right now, please have them look at our website because a lot of information is there for people to sign up.
Thank you, Jenny.
Nara, so Jim, if you could let me know in the chat where you are, I'd be happy to connect you with vetted, competent people in the Afghan diaspora.
Thank you both. Someone else asked, how can we be notified of those coming in on a P2 visa who will receive no assistance from the state so that we can help them?
Yeah, so well, P2 refers to the priority that refugees are given when they're admitted. And so if you're talking about a refugee, they will be assured by a US resettlement agency, and they will be provided the assistance we would give to any refugee upon their arrival. If you're referring to an Afghan parolee, then as was mentioned earlier, we are doing everything we can to know when they're arriving and just get all the support they're going to be needing as they arrive. And so again, if you connect with one of the resettlement agencies in our local offices, they're the ones that can best connect you to volunteer with any families that are arriving and making sure that their needs are supported.
I think I want to just quickly add to that. I think one way is also folks can help is that mobilizing resources, particularly foundations and philanthropy, local folks who are able to provide some resources by working with the resettlement agencies as well.
Thank you. I think there was also a question around if cities, if our cities are not resettling refugees, how we can help directly refugees in other states.
Sorry, I can answer, but I think a lot of organizations are looking for donations, and so I know it's maybe not an answer that's you want to hear, but Human Rights First, Human Rights, IRAP and others, they're kind of the front lines doing the advocacy. And so please give to them because they are doing a lot of great work. But regarding resettlement, any of the 9 refugee resettlement agencies are looking for support as well. And so wherever you live, there's refugee resettlement happening likely in perhaps the communities that you live. And so I would encourage people to go to Refugee Council USA. There is a map there, and if you zoom into your location, you can likely find an agency that welcomes refugees or other immigrants. And so please do connect there. But I think volunteering with these agencies, giving of your not only time, but resources and donations are critical. And even in-kind donations like bed sheets and kitchenware are all things that we're looking to collect.
Jenny, can you just list some of the agency names? I know some folks may not be aware of them, so that would be really.
Yeah, well, the largest agency is Catholic Charities. So that is run by the Migration Refugee Service of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. But they are locally the Catholic Charities that provide resettlement services. There's also the Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. And so you can look for Lutheran social services in your local community. The IRC is another large agency. I think USCRI also has resettlement sites, Ethiopian Community Development Association or Council, ECDC, and others. But the list is on RCUSA.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, another question from Kristen Badovich. In the past, my community has had many Afghan refugees. We have found great success in moms groups getting involved to help families with local resources. I recommend if your community has an influx of families, get the PTA involved. Afghan moms need allies and friends to help with the basic day-to-day things they need. Great, thank you, Kristen. That's a great resource. All right, other questions? Someone asked, are there any mutual aid funds being organized? Not sure if you can elaborate a little bit on that or if anyone wants to answer it.
I think as far as mutual aid for people in Afghanistan right now, there are groups that are trying to, purchase flights and food and stuff for people on the ground. But those are, the hope is I think those will kind of transfer into some longer term options as well. I'm not sure if Bilal or anybody else has any ideas on the Afghan diaspora that they might want to refer here as well.
Yeah, there were initially a few mutual aid funds to pay for application fees, flights, etc. And one specifically for LGBTQ Afghans that raised over $30,000 that I was a part of. But the fear right now is that there is a cash and liquidity crisis in Afghanistan with the banks being closed and the United States not transferring Afghan government funds. So we don't know if that cash will get to those people right now. In terms of mutual aid here for people arriving, those also exist, but I would really highly encourage people to donate to vetted organizations here in the United States, because as the other panelists mentioned, the refugee resettlement agencies have really been gutted, and this is going to be a long-term need. So that's, I think, in my opinion, that would be the best place to send your money.
Yeah, and I know someone asked, I think Mary, does anyone know how we can get money to an individual living in Kabul? And as Bilal was mentioning, there's not really any secure 100% guarantee that they will receive the money, unfortunately. I think there was another question in regards to the difference between benefit of refugees and parolees.
So I think the question was one that I answered. So just to clarify that the issue right now is that if you enter the United States as someone on humanitarian parole, you're only actually eligible for work authorization. This is a temporary status that lasts for 1 year from the date of your entry into the United States. And so there is some effort right now from the State Department to get creative with what we call IRMA funds, Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance, so that resettlement agencies can provide some type of assistance. And we're working with some members of Congress to quickly get what we call is referred to as RMP, but really all of the resettlement services for SIVs and refugees, right? So like if folks are familiar, right, there's a certain amount of services and benefits and medical assistance and the like that SIVs and refugees get when they arrive. They're not eligible for those as parolees. So we're working with members of Congress to get what we call authorization and funding so that they can be treated exactly like they would have if they came in as an SIV, if they came in as a refugee. And so we'll be looking to, once we have those bills introduced, reach out to folks again to make sure that their members of Congress support it. There's one other thing I wanted to flag, because we're starting to see this, and those of us that work on legal services, you know, are very concerned that because these people are coming in on humanitarian parole, they don't undergo the same process like as they arrive at the airport, right? So like, say, as sort of Bilal talked about, right? People are arriving at Dulles and going to baggage claim, and then it's like, and then what, right? And for some of them, they have family in the US, and it's like, great, a family member's picking them up. Well, but most of the time, these people don't actually understand that they came in under a temporary status and that they could be out of status in a year from the date of their entry. And so I just want to sort of make a plea. So my colleagues at HRF who do refugee representation and take care of asylum, we're wanting to make sure that if anybody has had the situation where they didn't go to one of the military bases and get connected to a resettlement agency, that those people still need to reach out to legal services providers to help them get asylum. So if you encounter anybody, right? So, I mean, I know this is going to sound crazy, but like, if you wind up being connected to an Afghan that has come in, ask them if they understand, to be honest, that they are here on a temporary status. You know, have they yet been connected to a legal service provider, you know, to a lawyer to help them apply for asylum? I mean, hopefully we'll get something through Congress for legalization, and it doesn't require this. But regardless, like, you know, this is unlike, this isn't like when you come across the southern border. This isn't like when somebody's placed in ICE detention and they can't go anywhere. These people can go to their family members, they can go to their friends, but we want to make sure that we don't lose track of these people, because we want to make sure that we get them to adjust to permanent status. And so I know this sounds crazy, and then I'm just basically like, everybody out in communities in America, like, if you encounter an Afghan, like, help us help them. So thanks.
And Jennifer, is there a timeline as far as, I know you mentioned a bill potentially being introduced. I know that we're working with very short time frame. Do you have any information on that you can currently share?
Well, the thing is, we want to get it passed quickly, right? Just because then that means that people are eligible for services and funding can flow. But Congress is slow, and so as soon as we have a sense, you know, hopefully we'll have at least one bill introduced by the end of this week that people can start asking their members to support. But I would sort of say you're going to hear from all of us over the next few weeks, asking you to support and get your members of Congress to support different pieces of legislation.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we conclude the webinar? On any last final questions for any of our panelists?
Could I just make a comment here? I know I've been kind of quiet throughout the panel, and just because there are so many much smarter people on here than I am, but I wanted to emphasize, you know, that you all in your communities, as you're working with your local governments, this is a huge problem for the Afghan diaspora, as has been mentioned, but this is also a huge problem for your veteran community. The veterans in this country, especially those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, are facing a significant moral injury from this event, and there will be major services that are going to be provided. Some of you might have been seeing online this you know, the digital Dunkirk, where veterans are desperately pleading for help for their Afghan allies. This is going to have a profound effect on the mental health of those veterans around you. And I would just ask, as you're going about your day and as you're working through this, please, you know, reach out to them and just offer your support, in addition to all the great work that you're doing to advocate for the Afghan diaspora, who desperately need your help. But I just wanted to make that plug for veteran groups as well.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you so much to all of our panelists. We greatly appreciate your time. And thank you everyone for joining us. We will include the recording of this webinar. And if it's okay with our panelists, we will share just your contact information for folks to be able to follow up with you. Thank you everyone, and we will go ahead and conclude the webinar.